The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
A new study in pediatrics finds that physical punishment increases the risk of mental disorders later on in life, even when the physical punishment isn't quite hard enough to be considered child abuse. This is interesting from the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is opposed to physical punishment. We now see studies that are saying 80% of parents report they rely on physical punishment to some extent. So what is physical punishment? It's kind of wide-ranging. Everything to a light slap to an all-out whipping with a belt or a paddle. All of those things are, of course, considered physical punishment. So Tracy Afifi is the author of this new study. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Community Health Sciences at the University of Manitoba in Canada. And she and some colleagues wanted to focus on 5 forms of physical punishment: pushing, grabbing, shoving, slapping, and hitting. So these are the ones that she looked at. She did not include spanking because it's kind of hard to define for the purposes of this study. What is spanking to one parent isn't necessarily to another, but those doing the research said a push is a push, a grab is a grab. So that's how this was done. The study was done with 20,000 people were analyzed in the U.S. who were aged 20 or older. 1,250 had experienced pushing, grabbing, shoving, slapping, and hitting sometimes or very often. About 20,000 said they experienced it rarely or never. They adjusted the results for gender, race, marital status, education, family histories of dysfunction, if the parents had drug problems, had already been hospitalized for mental illness, so that there may have been genetic factors, etc. What are the results? I'm not surprised by them. Maybe you're surprised by them, Lewis. People who experience physical punishment were more likely to experience almost every type of mental illness examined. Mood disorders, depression and mania, 1.5 times more prevalent in those who had been physically punished than those who had not. Risk of depression, 1.4 times greater. Risk of anxiety, 1.4 times greater. People who had been physically punished were also 1.6 times more likely to abuse alcohol and 1.5 times more likely to abuse drugs. Now, we often question on this show correlation and causation and say, well, there may be something that's not being accounted for here, which could really be the factor. What do you guys think about this one? I'm not finding anything that strikes me as obvious that would disconnect here some kind of causation.
If this is a direct connection, then I'm not shocked. No, sounds about right to me.
The other issue we have here is a political one, because as we know, authoritarian parenting, which is way more likely to include physical punishment, is often done by conservatives and also leads to those children being conservative later in life. So, Natan, this is a pretty interesting study overall based on what it says, but also based on the broader implications.
Right, and there's a little ambiguity in the same way that there was with the other case you mentioned, just in the sense that we don't know if it's this specific thing that parents are doing that's causing the mental illness later on in life, or if it's just that parents that engage in that sort of punishment of their children are more likely to do other things as yet unidentified that might lead them to later on in life be mentally ill.
Because what we're really talking about here is the mental component, the emotional and mental component to hitting your child,
right,
not the physical aspect of it. So I would assume that there are other there's probably mental, emotional abuse happening too.
There may be.
Yeah.
Or at least it would be more likely.
Yeah.